No, thank you.
Is it recording for everybody? Can you see that?
Great.
Cool. Thanks for nodding, Roxy. I never trust these things where I'm just recording it for myself or everyone. So thank you.
Okay, let's make a start then. So a huge and warm welcome to everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. I think we have got the few people straggling through.
I'll just
Charlotte.
keep, you want to start? I'll just keep letting people in as and when they arrive.
That is amazing. Thank you. So really nice to have you. Today we are going to talk about the must-know HR risks and opportunities in 2025. My name is David Hudson, and I am the founder and director of the HR department, and I'm joined by my co-host and colleague Charlotte, who will introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I work really closely with David, but I'm also the owner and director of the HR department, Coventry.
Fantastic. And Charlotte and I are going to be working through this together and also sharing some of our own experiences, just to bring some of this content more alive for you. So, as I say, we're going to talk about the biggest risks to your business in 2025 and how to handle them, what actually the opportunities are. So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of good things to be thinking about this year. We're going to talk to you about the new employment legislation that you just can't ignore, and simple steps to make sure that you avoid financial and reputational damage. Um, Charlotte and I every day work through so many of these issues almost simultaneously, and having sort of scanned the landscape, the reason for us putting this together is because we wanted to help our friends and clients across across the business make sure that they're in a good place. We are seeing much more complexities in how things are panning out. So again, this is sort of partly to help arm you to deal with some of those. So for those of you that do join, you'll know that we love it to be super participative, super interactive. So please do use the chat function, which is at the top of my screen. Hopefully you can see your chat function, which is the little box that says chat. And then through the course of this session, Charlotte and I will respond to questions, comments, and anything else that you want to talk through. We've been joined by Cal. Morning, Cal. Great to see you. Thanks very much for coming on to our webinar. Right, so without further ado, then let's hear from you. What we're interested to hear is what worries you most about HR and employment law in your organization. So, what worries you most about HR and employment law in your organization? So, there's no right or wrong. Please just drop down in the box. That also helps both myself and Charlotte to focus on maybe some particular key points that are of interest to you. So, yeah, do please jot down your views. Don't be shy, by the way. Charlotte, whilst we're waiting, what do you
Yeah.
find your clients tell you is their number one worry?
I think uncertainty at the moment is probably the biggest worry. You know, that there's so much in the media about changes that are coming up, so many things that the government promised kind of when they were going to be elected that we're still not entirely sure on what actually is going to be the reality. I know that we're going to talk about the employment rights bill and stuff in a little bit, so we've got time to kind of go in more detail. But I think just that not knowing, because how can you prepare when you're not entirely sure what you're preparing for is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, yeah, I would totally agree with that. Cal makes a great point. Well done, Cal,
Mhm.
for being brave and putting that in. But so many of people we deal with, as Cal says, are worried because they're not sure about employment law. They're worried that they're not compliant. Um, it's quite a complicated landscape. So hopefully, Cal will be able to unpick some of that for you also today. So thank you for that. Okay, what we've done is we've taken the main topics that we are seeing as as the challenges in 2025.
Mhm.
So some things to think about here, first of all, and certainly we are finding the same in the business, that employment tribunals are at a 5-year high. So it's estimated that there's about a 13% increase in claims. And the evidence shows that employees are more inclined to raise claims to receive compensation. And as Charlotte says, that's been for a number of factors, not least that people are finding life hard out there. So, unfortunately, we are seeing more spurious claims also as a result of that. Um, just an FYI, the claims process as it stands at the moment is the tribunal service is about 18 months behind. So if an employee raises a claim today, there's every possibility that they won't be seen until 18 months, and that's probably going to get worse, which we'll talk about later. So Charlotte, talk a bit through from what we're seeing are the consequences of this surge in claims.
Yeah, I think anytime you have an employee or an ex-employee who goes to ACAS and kind of wants to raise something, it feels very personal because it feels like an attack on your business or on you. And quite often what we're seeing at the moment are things that maybe 3, 4 years ago, or even, I'd hate to say it, even pre-COVID, that wouldn't have even been an issue, are now being raised, they're being blown out of proportion, people's feelings are hurt, people are saying, well, yeah, kind of with inferring a reason. So if we can't see a reason, well, it must be because of my ethnicity. It must be because I rate that I sometimes feel anxious, and that's mental health, and that's a protected characteristic. It's things that were small not so long ago are now becoming bigger, and I think that becomes hard for an employer to understand because these are everyday, not necessarily trivial, but feel smaller issues that suddenly become huge problems that either need to be dealt with head on, and that involves a solicitor or a lawyer, and that involves a lot of money, or it involves settling in some way. And again, that involves paying somebody money who doesn't necessarily deserve it, if that's the right word, David. Or, it
Yeah.
feels very harsh that you have to then deal with this problem,
Yeah.
especially if you've never had to deal with anything like this before in your business. We've had so many clients recently where they've literally never spoken to ACAS. They don't know what they do, they don't know what the service is about. And it takes a lot of time and effort to work out what's going on and what's happening, really, especially if you've never done it before.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And to that point, Pilar
I'm
raises a
just
good
going to say we've got
question
a
around
question.
what are the main causes of the claims. And we're certainly seeing a spike in claims relating to the Equality Act, and also within that, claims relating to discrimination due to the neurodiversity.
For some
Um,
reason, I've been number is in days.
I think we've got someone that's not on mute.
Put her on mute.
Great, thank you. So yes, Pilar, they are there is a spike in that, and the main causes for these, as Charlotte's just said, is many and varied. Employees have a statutory right to raise a claim, and will do so where they think that there has been some wrongdoing, even if actually it ultimately transpires that that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, neurodiversity and equality are the biggies that we're dealing with at the moment.
Yeah. And just to say with that as well, any employee, even pre being an employee, even during the interview process, anyone can raise a discrimination claim.
Mm,
So they don't even need to have been employed by you or worked with you very long for them to decide, I think they're discriminating against me because, I've got ADHD and they don't like that.
mm,
And ACAS don't, there's no kind of checking with ACAS, so anyone can make these claims. I think that's why, again, when we're seeing this spike in them. Sorry,
yeah,
David, I thought it was important to just say,
yeah,
it doesn't
absolutely.
even matter if they've been with you for a day, anyone can claim for those
Yeah,
things.
it's a good point. One often overlooks that even at recruitment stage, as you say, um, you can be open to a claim. So, yeah, good shout. So I suppose what does that mean in real terms? And I mean, this in itself is a complicated process, but what we wanted to show was that if a simple claim, which is to us an unfair, straightforward unfair dismissal claim, the maximum financial award an employee could be given is £21,000. Now, that calculation is done through what some of you might know as the statutory redundancy formula. So it's a very formulaic process, and it's based on service and earnings. But then on top of that is the compensatory award, and that's the area you get into where judges then take a view around what other financial loss you might have experienced. So that could be being unemployed or loss of bonuses or other things, and that's capped at around £115,000. At the moment, on average, we see that the claim amount for unfair dismissal is around £6,000 to £15,000. So, but that's not to say that it's as easy as that. So if you go to tribunal, you can expect to be tied up in 6 months of paperwork and employment, kind of, employers and solicitors and all of those things, and it's a complete nightmare. So you don't want to get in this space. Also, with discrimination claims, so claims through the Equality Act, the reward for those are uncapped. It is fairly unusual to looking at the statistics for this to be a mega payout situation, but nonetheless, judges are able to, award as they see appropriate. And then the final stinger, if you like, as if that isn't bad enough, is the 25% uplift that's applied if you don't follow the ACAS code of conduct. So it's really, really important that even amongst all of those things, as you're considering dismissal and even performance management, you must make sure you're following a fair process. And as always, talk to Charlotte and I if any of that is complicated, or you just want some reassurance that you're doing the right thing. So Charlotte, what do we tend to tell businesses around how they best protect themselves from any of those horror stories?
So I think the first thing is to have some policies in place. And I know it sounds really, really silly and straightforward, but actually the first thing that the tribunal will look at is, are you following the ACAS code? And, 9 times out of 10, that means, have you got a policy in place in terms of how you handle a grievance, how you handle a disciplinary, how you handle a redundancy, and have you followed that through? If we can show that we followed a fair and reasonable process, that is normally enough to mitigate that 25% uplift. It's where we've kind of gone a bit left field and sort of done our own thing and gone, well, I know I need to do that, but I didn't do that bit. That's where that uplift can really sting, because we can't show that we've actually been fair and consistent. I guess linked with that as well is you need to have the right people dealing with the problems. Quite often, it feels like, oh, well, we'll just give it to that person's manager and they can deal with it. But actually, that manager might be new, that manager might not have ever dealt with something like this before, and that can lead to problems, because although people don't deliberately do a bad job, not knowing can sometimes you fill the gap with what you think is right, and sometimes what you think is right is not actually the right thing. So one of the things that we really specialize in is absolutely having those conversations with people, talking them through, giving them a bit of a script if they need, and quite often I give people like little phrases or words to say if they get stuck, because sometimes you don't know the answer, and filling that gap can be as dangerous as not answering the question at all. So that's always really useful to kind of try and get in there as quickly as possible, but not necessarily say the wrong thing.
Yeah, good shout. We do that a lot every day. We're giving people phrases and landmine words not to use and things. It is in the detail. Brilliant. So, unfortunately, we were talking about this yesterday. We are seeing a growing amount of cases that are relating to the mental health crisis. I don't know if any of you saw the news yesterday, but none of us will have missed the fact that there's been a huge spike in costs, and the news, interestingly, referred to it last night as awful April because of just how much that has put more burden on people. So these things are playing a part in how people are showing up at work. But what we're also seeing is that that's then elevating stress, where, for example, maybe companies have had to take on more work but got less people because they can't afford the NI hikes and things. There is this other issue, which is that people are unfortunately burning out more and more. So, and statistically, 1 in 4 employees report work-related mental health struggles. And I would say, I think, Charlotte, I don't know what you think here, but that's low. I think that's probably people that have admitted it. Actually, I would imagine it's much higher than
It's
that.
probably at some points 4 in 4, if I'm
Yeah,
totally, if we're all really honest. There are
yeah.
points where everybody struggles with their mental health. I guess we're probably going to talk about this in a second, but it's having the stuff in place to help with that and to help people cope with that. That's going to be the important part moving forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And it's that that's key. So making sure when an employee approaches you that you are taking seriously what they're saying and making what we refer to as reasonable adjustments. And that's a fancy term, really, that's about listening to what people are telling you and finding ways to help them through the issues that they're trying to deal with, will be, from a tribunal's perspective, the most important part of showing that you're trying to support that employee. In reality, when we get calls about this, often leaders, managers, entrepreneurs are really scared about how they deal in this area, because neurodiversity in particular is a very difficult area. And certainly, Charlotte and I are not psychologists or doctors or any of those things, and people generally aren't. So it's a very tricky area to be in, but it's not impossible to deal with, and that hopefully, keep that bit of reassurance in mind, that the risks, the reward outweighs the risk with this. You've got to be really slow and following through a good process to help people ultimately do what they are there to do, which is to deliver for you. Um, we really think here that what we're seeing is that often, because managers are so nervous about dealing with issues, they tend to shy away, and that's totally understandable. So we really would be saying that in this area, if you're starting to experience that in your business, make sure your managers are trained to spot those issues. There's some really good stuff that can help here. There's mental health first aider training. And we certainly, we do provide that. There's e-learning for people. Um, but mostly, we think that fostering a culture of openness, where if people are in a difficult position, they feel able to share what they can, so that they don't feel so isolated. Because, as we know, with mental health and well-being challenges, one of the big difficulties is the isolation that it can create for people. So don't shy away from it. It is complicated. Talk to us if you've got a case that's difficult to deal with. Deal with it sensitively, and just remember that we can get through it. It just needs a little bit of careful management. So I'm going to hand back to you, Charlotte, because you are a bit of an expert in this area, my own resident expert. There's horrible employment law changes coming. Talk to
There
us about
are. Yeah, so I mean, you may not have seen, because you're probably not as nerdy and geeky about employment law as I am, but so the Employment Rights Bill has passed through regular Parliament and is now going through the House of Lords. So what that means is they basically just spend ages looking over the kind of fine detail of it. Um, the likelihood is it's probably not going to all come to be, fully boxes ticked until about October, is the assumption, which would mean that some of the things that they've got over on this kind of in the little bubbles here may come about towards the end of this year. But the reality is we're probably looking at 2026 before a lot of this stuff comes in. Some of those things that are on there have already come to pass. So things like, if you think about, parental and bereavement leave. This month it's been launched the neonatal care leave and pay for that. So that's, a wonderful step forward for parents who do find out that their tiny babies end up in ICU. So that's a great, a good change. They're not all negative, but actually some of the really big ones that are going to affect employers are things like day one rights. So David talked earlier about the tribunal and claims. And at the moment, to claim unfair dismissal or constructive dismissal, employees need to have been with you for 2 years or more. That day one right would mean that, again, like the discrimination claims, anybody can claim from day one. So you could have somebody who comes into your business, is clearly not right, messes around, causes loads of problems. You decide to end their employment, and then they claim unfair dismissal. And they probably will put in a bit of a discrimination claim as well, because that's what we tend to see. So those are going to mean that we need stricter policies. We need to be really clear about probation periods, other stuff to pick up on there. So I know 0-hour contracts is a bit of a worry for people. What that is looking like at the moment is that where they say exploitative, what they mean is where somebody is doing pretty much the same hours week in, week out, but we keep them on a 0 hours contract. It means we don't have to pay them the holiday all of the time. When we don't need them, we could just bin them off. And we can be, some employers can be a little unscrupulous with how they use them. So what the government's trying to introduce is, if you've got somebody for, I think it's 12 weeks, they want to do it. If somebody's doing the same, they work a Wednesday, Thursday every single week for the last 12 weeks, we need to look at, do we need to contract that person to those hours? Because clearly there's a business need for those hours to be there permanently. So that's what they're looking at with those. Bits that we don't know as much about. So down the bottom is enforcement body. So the idea is that there's going to be and we don't know how that works, but somebody will come out, and if a complaint is made, they will come out and assess you and your business, your policies, how you are treating people. So it's really important, again, that we keep harping on about the policies thing, but that should be the kind of backbone to what you're doing, because that sets out straight away from day one for your employees what they should be doing, and also really clear of, like, if they're not doing it, what we will do in a response. I talked too long, didn't I? That's what you need for the slides.
I'm trying to seamlessly follow your content because it's really good.
Thank you. Oh yeah, there we go. So the first one on there is about reviewing your contracts and policies. So it's a really good idea, especially if you use 0-hour contracts. We don't know for definite what is coming in, but it is likely that if you've got somebody doing the same hours week in, week out, they have done for ages, it's time to think about, do we actually just contract that person to those hours or as close to those hours as possible, and then just flex them up for the extra that we need? I appreciate it's going to be harder for a place like hospitality because, previous 12 weeks we've done really well, and then we have a terrible wet summer, and you clearly don't need as many people working in your bar or restaurant. So we're hoping there's going to be some flexibility in it. And again, that goes back to the staffing model is, do you have the right people in the right places? Because if not, and this day one rights comes in, you're going to need to deal with them a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently than we probably do already, because we do have that safety buffer of the 2 years. And, as the last point says, we kind of talked about it earlier, you need to have your managers in a good place to deal with that, because if they're not in a good place and not able to deal with it, they either need some good advice, like we provided the HR department, or you need to be coaching them through it, because your biggest risk will be your managers kind of go off piste a little bit, and then you end up not only having to deal with an unhappy employee, you're probably going to have a really peed off manager because they're saying, well, you didn't help me and tell me what to do. And the likelihood of a tribunal increase is going to increase as well, because the person, the employee's peed off. So, having that structure is really important.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. The other thing that we're seeing, again, we talk about this often, I'm sure you guys do too in your businesses, is it's a really funny old landscape out there, I think, with the recruitment piece. So I'll give you some context of what we're seeing. So we do offer recruitment services, and we've run it's fair to say we've recently run three campaigns. So we ran a campaign for a HR business partner for our own business. We received 320 applications. We ran an ad for an administrator for one of our clients. We received 600 applications, and we ran an ad for a paralegal associate. And I think the number there, Charlotte, was about 250, 300.
Yeah, yeah, it was a lot of CVs, a lot of
Yeah.
CVs.
Charlotte particularly is CV'd out and is going to have a meltdown, I think, if I ask her to do any more, understandably so. So
I see one more CV that's clearly been written by ChatGPT. I might throw my laptop out of the window. It's too much. It's too much. They're all the same. I hate
what
it.
was what's wrong with that? Mine, ChatGPT wrote me a lovely CV, Charlotte, surely.
The problem is that it's going to push good people out of jobs that they are qualified for and put people who are completely unsuited and unqualified into jobs that they're going to fail at very quickly.
Yeah.
And then you've got to start this whole cycle again, which costs a lot of money and a lot of time and my sanity as well, David. Think of
Yeah, you're
me,
right.
my mental health.
You're right. It's and we had a first slightly deviating, but trying to sort of share to help here that Charlotte and I interviewed an individual last week who was a super individual and a super CV. Um, the evidence suggests that that individual was using Google Translate. Um, and also, I'm hearing more examples from other HR colleagues that people are using chat during interviews to respond to questions. So it really
I
has
actually
become,
I had
uh,
an advert on Instagram for an app that can answer the questions using a version of ChatGPT as you're doing the job interview.
wow,
I was like, why am I getting this?
wow,
I was
crazy.
like,
Yeah.
but that's how desperate people are. You know, we keep talking about cost of living, and like this is, you know, the reality is that money is tight for some people, and if you can
Mm,
kind of fake your way into a higher paid job, then why wouldn't you? Because, you know, you need that extra money, you need that extra zero on your paycheck. I
yeah.
get the logic behind it, but again, it's setting people up to fail.
Yeah,
That's the
you're
problem.
absolutely right. It's placing a lot of burden, additional burden. The other thing that we are seeing is a much higher spike in applications from overseas candidates who are, you know, again, very good candidates. But the statutory requirement is to meet the right to work, you know, requirements. And so, even as a subset of this, it's really important, given that the reality of the landscape, that you are making sure you're doing your right to work checks on your new candidates, as I'm sure you will be, so that you can be confident that everything is as it should be, which it largely will be. But you know, check once, check twice is better than no checks. So there's a lot of candidates out there we're seeing. Actually, to be honest, we're not seeing that is all talent. Probably, again, this is totally arbitrary. Charlotte will jump in here also, but I think on average, if of the number of CVs we see, probably 15 to 20% might be, you know, might be good.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's probably fair, which means that just go back to that original point, is it's a lot of time and effort. Like even just having to click through, open those CVs, read through them, work out what's real and what's chat GPT, and actually assess if they're good for the job is not just a quick couple of minute job. It's, you know, it's there's a lot going on. And when we get 300 applicants through, times that, you know, 5-10 minutes by 300, you've basically made a full-time job for somebody before you've even found decent people.
yeah, yeah, 100%. So yeah, I mean, you can see the risks. I think I'm sure, experiencing it in your own ways. Feel free to drop in any anecdotes that you have in the chat if you want to share, because I think we're all feeling the pain, to be frank. The risk with this is people are hiring quickly, making mistakes, and it's costly. So each vacancy, it's reckoned, cost about £30,000, and that will be cost in terms of onboarding, time, equipment, and all the other things. And there again, if that's not working, you've got all the fees again to have to go to market and find. And also, people know that they can cherry pick. Talent knows that it's a massively open market out there for them at the moment. So, probably one of our biggest practical pieces of advice here is if you find someone good, grab them quick because people are just not waiting around. We're hearing of so many instances where people are moving off after receiving an offer to look at other offers. So yeah, it's a bit brutal out there, to be honest, but there are ways through it and persevere. So with recruitment, what you want to be thinking about, as I've said, is don't be waiting around. Um, Recruitment isn't a one-off thing. You have to be building your brand, making sure people know who you are in the market, positioning yourself as an employer of choice so that you essentially create that magnet that people draw to. If you think about brands like Disney, Apple, Tesco, despite what we think about them, the brand is really what draws people to them. So think about how you're doing that with your brand. And also, it's a myth, really, that whacking great big salaries on their own are the things that draw people. Certainly, they will do, but you can go to a company and earn your £500,000 a year and be miserable because no one's nice and it's horrible offices and you're having to travel to middle of Outer Hebrides every day. That's no fun. So you can offer things like flexibility, engagement recognition are the big things here. Charlotte, from what you've been doing, what would your big takeaway here be with recruitment?
Um, I think it's being upfront and honest as well during the recruitment process. You, yes, there are a lot of challenges in looking at the CVs and stuff, but when you think you've found a good pool of people, I think it's really important early on to kind of set up how you work as a business, how your culture is, to make sure this person is aligned with you as well as you with them, because you might be absolutely loving a candidate, but they come and work for you and they're like, oh, I regret this choice. It's not what I thought it was. And again, you're back to square one, you're back to those 300 CVs. So I think just being clear about what's expected from the job, having a job description or a person spec is really helpful with that because, but I wouldn't give it out too early because what then you end up with is the chat GPT version where the person just parrots back to you what you want to hear. But once they are kind of in that offer stage and you think you want them to be with you, giving them that kind of expectation is useful because it sets up then how the rest of their employment journey is going to be with you.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's really good advice. Okay, so just again, we're moving towards the end of the session, so feel free to drop things into chats. We are going to leave time for Q&As at the end also, so just to make sure you get as much of it out of it as you can. So in all of those things, then, what are the opportunities for us as employers this year? And what we're seeing, and we've popped them onto a bit of a list here that we'll sort of skim through, but essentially we're seeing quite a change in what people are looking for. So the big requirements that are the big things that are attracting people is flexibility for work, which is being driven by the change in the right to request flexible working legislation. And Labour's whole policy on change in employment law is about making sure employment law can meet the needs of today's society. And that therefore follows full circle that today's society is now much more about flexible working. So you really want to be in a position to respond to that. We're noticing that there's a real drive for people moving careers because they want to pick particular bits of training or experience rather than the days where, and I sound like my mum and dad, but in my day, you join a company and then you'd leave them and have a carriage clock at the end of it, and it was all very sort of samey. Those days are gone. So um, it comes a bit of a shock, I think, for some of our clients that in the old days, again, dare I say, constant movement on the CV often was a red flag that would distract people from taking people on. Actually, now we have to see it as the norm, I think. The other thing people are really looking for is making sure that the culture's right. Charlotte, what's been your experience with candidates and culture here?
Yeah, do you know what, actually that's a really good point because a lot of people, I think I've done about 24 interviews for us now, our role, and loads of people were asking about the culture, like what is it like to work here day to day? What what does your day look like? Like how, and what they're really wanting to know is whether David's a horrible boss. But actually the reality is people want to know, am I going to be micromanaged? Is my manager going to be on my back all of the time, or can I have a bit of autonomy? You know, we are human beings. We want to be able to kind of sail our own ship in a way. And I think where you've got a culture of very micromanaging, very constantly under scrutiny, constantly feeling like your best is not good enough, no recognition, no thanks, no, you know, even just noticing the hard work that goes into stuff that maybe isn't, you're not necessarily shouting about. That all feeds into the culture. And lots of people want to know about that. Lots of people want to know before they get into a business, actually, what does it feel like to work here? Like, yes, I've seen the website, and yes, I've seen your job advert, and yes, I've heard what you've got to say, but actually, what's my week going to feel like? Like, am I going to come into work and be worried about, you know, not finishing off that letter from yesterday? Can I ask to go to the dentist next week because I've got an emergency filling that needs doing, or am I going to get shouted at for not booking it at the right time? And I think that that plays a lot into it. I think employees now, because they have got the option, like David said, a job is not for life. So employees now can, you know, vote with their feet. They can leave at any point, and you know, successful people, talented people can go into a job very quickly. So if
Mm.
the culture isn't right, if the fit isn't right, you know, they're going to move on very quickly. So if you've got quite a high attrition rate, or you know, that's people leaving, it might be worth looking at. If the job looks great on paper, is the reality, you know, are you selling them a bit of a lemon? Did you not tell them what the job was going to be like in reality before they got there? And then when they get there, they're like, oh, this is not what I was promised. Um,
Mm.
and I think it's worth thinking about aligning those two things, because what you sell it as and what the reality of the day job is can sometimes, you know, you have good intentions, but they can sometimes be quite far apart.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. That's really, really good. And I'm not a horrible boss, for the record.
Oh, that was, yeah, to on camera, that was not, to be clear. Just
I'm
another thing, actually, I thought of, David, sorry to jump on, is something that David and I have been learning a little bit more about because it was new to us as well, is that top line about talent development and succession. Your local councils or your local business authorities, most places now have government grants that can sponsor apprenticeships and extra training. So it's not necessarily just about taking on youngsters and, you know, 16, 17 year olds who are out of school. You know, anybody can be on an apprenticeship in theory, anybody can do extra training, and there are grants and help available. So if that's something that you promote within your business, and it's for you know, obviously it's for the benefit of your business, but for unselfish reasons as well. You know, you want people to have extra skills, extra qualifications, you want them to do well. That's a great thing to be able to promote, and it doesn't always have to cost you out of your own pocket.
Yeah, I love that. And we're practicing what we
We are
preach.
literally doing that.
Yeah, we are doing that. Yeah, it's a superb, you know,
Yeah, but it's a good way to show that you're committed to your employees,
yeah,
that you know you're willing to give them this time, give some money if you need to, but to let them develop themselves. And yeah, it's great for your business, but it's also good for them because if they ever leave, they've got these extra skills that they can take with them.
yeah, 100%. Um, the other thing I want to touch on here is equality, diversity, and inclusion. It's always been a part of what we do. Um, the whole thing here, which is a whole other area, but just to touch on, is that the landscape shifting. There's obviously things happening globally that makes this quite a complicated area for people to navigate. But we are definitely seeing a much more focus on in what was referred to as intersectionality, which is this whole idea of um, all people being treated equal and policies being written and practices being adopted that absolutely allow for um, everybody to be involved. So um, now that probably sounds like, oh, hang on, that's equality, diversity, and inclusion. But there's a bit of thinking around this, around that potentially even that is creating barriers to people because equality, diversity, and inclusion is not just focused on gender type, sexual orientation, marital status, race, or religion. It's based on the person. So intersectionality is much more now about the person. So there's some really good opportunities here, I think, particularly with what's happening across the world to showcase that whole principle, as I'm sure you will be, that ultimately we want people to be people. We celebrate that as a way of being together rather than as a way of driving divides. So great opportunities here, stuff we're certainly thinking about at the moment.
David, we've got a question from Cal, sorry, in the chat. So Cal questions, if you have multiple offices in England, do you go to the local authority where the office is? So yeah, Cal, so like I know you've got up in Edgbaston, haven't you? So I would go to the local authority up in Birmingham and see what they've got, because each different region has different funding pots and different stuff that's available. So up here, where I'm based, I was chatting to somebody where they've just renewing a pot of funding in the area for people over 50 to do training, but that's not available in a slightly different area. So it's can be dependent on the local authority, but it's always worth checking what they've got, and they'll also mostly know what they've got coming up as well.
Great. Okay, super. Thank you. So we've talked about, I mean, this is a recurring theme. Really, what you need to make sure is that you've got the right support in place so that you can navigate these things. They are costly, they are costly situations to fall foul of. So do make sure that you talk to us. We can advise you on all of those things and much, much more. Often just via a really quick phone call. What do I do here, or how does that work? We love to talk to people and do so most of each day. So we also have a free audit that you can take advantage of. Feel free to scan that QR code there, which will give you a bit of a snapshot around where your business is in relation to the things that Charlotte and I have talked about. Next on from that, the other things we're sort of suggesting to people is this area is all about compliance, following statutory requirements. But one of the things we're sort of just leaving with people is, beyond that, how is your HR working? Because there's some really good things you can get into insofar as training managers, making sure you've got good people practices that will be the solution to making sure some of these risks are averted, because people are well trained, well educated, and ultimately moving in the same direction. So I'll pause there from the blurb, and we can definitely take questions. Feel free to jump in if you've got a voice question, or pop something in the messaging. Charlotte, do you have any questions?
Oh, have I got any questions for you? That's a broad topic, isn't it?
Yeah. What's for lunch? Or
Yeah,
yeah.
always, I'm very food motivated, so it's always a big one. I guess my question is, how do you, as a business owner, how do you make sure the culture is right for your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as a business owner, I have to be self-aware of my strengths and my limitations. And I have to be open and vulnerable enough to take the feedback if the culture is maybe not quite where people feel it should be, or where maybe we're having off days. So I've had to learn to accept that not all feedback's bad feedback, and I shouldn't be defensive about that. So it's really being open and receptive, I think, to the team, treating people equally, and embracing different ideas, I guess, and different ways of working that maybe to me might feel uncomfortable, but to others might actually be better for them. So It's a journey with culture. I don't feel like where we are today is where we were 2 years ago and where we'll be in 2 years' time.
I like that. That's a good answer.
Okay.
Oh,
Um,
nope. We've got a couple of going on in the chat. So Clara
Fantastic.
says, do you see any trend regarding business investing more on preventing than reacting to claims? Love that. Go on, Dave,
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Uh, yeah, we do. We are definitely seeing more requests for training, to be honest. We offer a lot of different training from e-learning to management training. We're definitely seeing a real increase in new clients because people want to make sure their policies and procedures are right. Um, and also, we're seeing people be more creative with engagements. So, low cost activities like making sure they're having team meetings and other things so that people remain engaged and happy uh, would be off the top of my head what I would say. Would you add anything to that, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think in terms of investing, I think it's the investment is in the right people. You know, if you've got the right people, so that comes from employing the right people, but it's also having the right people in your business. You know, sometimes there are, especially in slightly bigger organizations, there's always somebody who like, oh God, person is a nightmare, but they've been here forever and nothing's ever been done. And it's like, well, if the world is getting tougher and if our purses are tighter than ever, is having somebody who's not a great employee and can sometimes be a problem. Actually, are you creating more problems and more risk to your business by allowing that to happen? And then
Mm,
that stems into having the right managers and team leaders, supervisors, whoever, who are
mm,
trained and capable to then deal with that person. I know we harped on about it a lot, but actually, if you send somebody into a situation where they don't really know what they're doing and are not really comfortable, they're not going to do a good job. Whereas if you've got them trained, if they're comfortable and used to dealing with people, you can get a much smoother outcome to stuff. And it might not be a happy ending, but at least it will be safer for you as a business.
yeah, I love that. Thank you. A really good question here from Cal, one that we get asked commonly. So back to you, um,
Um,
Charlotte. Cal says, please expand on flexibility. From my point of view, it's things like starting a bit later and leaving a bit earlier for the school run, make up hours over the weekend if you have an out of work commitment during the work week. This can be difficult to navigate. So, how do we tend to respond to that? Because it's a difficult question, I think.
Yeah, and flexibility is one of those things like the word reasonable within employment law. It's kind of it can be huge, it can be tiny. I think it's important to there's two kind of conflicting things, and we need to balance those. So one is what your business or organization needs, and sometimes that is, the reality of having somebody in the office to answer the phone at the times that we tell our clients or customers that we're open. Um, you know, but that's balanced with, does somebody need some time off to take their children to school? And actually, if you can be flexible, if they need, a couple of days a week flexibility of half an hour and they'll make the time up, then absolutely, why wouldn't you do that? I think where people get a bit worried or scared about the word flexibility is they're like, oh my goodness, everyone's going to ask for a 4-day working week and we can't possibly do that. And the reality is, no, you don't have to do that. There are reasons we can say no, but actually that's that thing on culture is if you can give somebody a little bit of leeway, a little bit of flexibility, like Cal's example here, that's going to go absolutely miles in terms of their loyalty and their dedication to you as a business. If they know that, okay, every Friday I need to leave 10 minutes early because the traffic's really terrible and I need to get to school to pick up my kids, but I'll make sure that I, log back on when I get home and I finish up and they'll probably do another 20 minutes. It's that give and take. It's when it doesn't hurt you or your business, you should be thinking yes is the answer before no. And there might be times when it's a no, and that's totally fine. But you gain a lot more by saying yes and allowing it than you will be by saying no. Because that shows that there's a give and take to that employment relationship.
Good. Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay, I think that's it. So just to finish, appreciate that we're at the top of the hour almost. Unsurprisingly, we can help you with all of the things we've talked about and so much more. So just contact Charlotte or I if you've got our numbers on the emails and everything, if you want to talk through any of these topics. We love to chat, as you've seen, and one of the things that we do that's well through these our popular HR how-to series, where again we go into conversation about how do I deal with this? What is a conflict? How do I recruit the best people? And they're very snappy sessions, half an hour, with 10, 15 minutes max chat about the practicalities and then loads of questions and how this and what that. So do please take full advantage of those. They are totally free. And finally, just to say that on our website there are various tools to help you. So feel free to navigate onto the website if you want other things. There's loads of free fact sheets and all of those things that do please take as much advantage as you can of those. And then finally, just to say, we are at the moment offering free audits. So both Charlotte and I would come out, listen to your pain points, and then help you understand where the risks and opportunities might be within your organization. So those are free. They'll be free during April. Again, do please contact us. We will send you the slides following this session, and that'll have our contact details on too. And finally, as a lovely giveaway, sorry, I'm just looking at my screen. Thanks a lot for attending, and we will send you our two new fact sheets. So the employment law fact sheet, which we've just prepared, and a bit of a follow-up to this, which is preventing people problems in 2025, which again is a way of just saying thank you for attending the webinar. So that's it from me. Any closing comments, Charlotte, from you?
No, just those of you who are clients, you know where we are if you want to kind of talk things in more detail. Those of you who aren't, we absolutely, David and I, as as David said, we love a chat. We love to yap. So please, if you have any further questions, we always, I'm very, very geeky, so I'm always very happy to talk employment law and the ins and outs of what's going on. And if it makes you feel a little better and a bit more relaxed, then that's our job done. So thank you for listening and letting us yap away.
Okay, everybody. Well, yeah, I think Charlotte said it all. So we look forward to seeing you soon, and thanks again for attending.
Lovely. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.